Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us in this very exciting dialogue on building a resilient, inclusive food security and food system transformation in Africa. I have the great pleasure of moderating today's panel. I'm the Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa, based here in the beautiful city of Abu Dhabi. And I would like to convey the greetings of our President and Chair, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon. For some of you who may not know, GGGI, the Global Green Growth Institute, is an international intergovernmental organization, treaty-based organization, headquartered in Seoul, South Korea, working with member and partner states to transform their economies into a green growth model. And we are very pleased to have the UAE as one of our founding members. Thank you, Nadine and Amath, for accepting to join this panel. And let me start with you, Nadine. Food system transformation and scaling up agriculture is at the heart of government's discussions and planning in the Africa region. At the COP28, we launched a $10 billion US food security program for supporting countries and members. And this requires partnerships. But before we start talking about partnerships, I want to ask you first, for our audience who may not know much about IFAD, what is IFAD about? What is its mandate? What is IFAD planning to do?
Thank you and good morning. Let me start with the beginning by putting the mandate of IFAD into context and into context of the food security and the food system agenda in the region. And I had a predecessor from FAO talking about the food system agenda in the Africa region. So where we are coming from is from the World Food System Summit that took place in 2021. And we speak a lot at the UN. It was convened by the UN Secretary General. We still speak a lot about food security, but I think it's important that we do adjust our language and that we make the difference between food security and food systems. What do we mean is that we have embraced, if I can say, a system approach, an integrated approach, which means that we know that today we still have over 700 billion people hungry, and the challenge is indeed food security and nutrition. And that challenge is big, Africa being one of the region in the world, actually, where hunger is at the highest level. 1 in 5 people are still hungry. But unfortunately, handling hunger and food security is a huge challenge, but it's not enough today anymore. We have to do more. We have to ensure food security and nutrition for all, but we are also all aware that we need to ensure this in a sustainable manner, in a sense that food systems today are responsible for about 30% of greenhouse gas emission, 70% of the water use, 70% of the biodiversity loss. So there's a whole issue of sustainability, and we are also seeing the impact of climate change on agricultural productivity. That's a second element of the system approach. The third element of the system approach, especially in Africa, is that those who work in the food systems, it's about 50% of the population. They live in poverty. They feed the world, and they are the poorest of the poor, and while the food industry is worth trillions of dollars. It's estimated at 11 trillion because basically they feed 8 billion people. They have a captive market. So why is it that those who operate the food systems, the agri-food workers, the producers, the traders, the processors, they live in poverty? So there's also a commitment that food system must provide decent incomes and livelihood to those who feed the world. And finally, COVID told us about the supply chains, about the resilience to shock and crisis. So basically, the agenda we are moving forward is food security and nutrition for all, sustainability, decent incomes and livelihood for those who work in the value chain, and resilience of supply chains to shocks and crises. So, Mahamadou, it's about food security and hunger, but it's a global agenda where we have to make the system more equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. You touched on a very important topic, and we will circle back onto some of the challenges. Let me move to Amath. Amath, for some of our audience who may not know about AGRA and the AFS, the platform, the forum that is in place. Could you tell us more about what is AFS, what is its mission, and how do we link that to the ambitions of transforming the food system in Africa?
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us at this important inaugural event, which bring all together here in Abu Dhabi. So, but before coming to the Africa Food System Forum, which is the world's largest platform that brings all stakeholders together on the continent to transform food system, let me just start by saying, presenting it, what brings us together, the theme which is Together Humanity, something which we all share, and we wake up this morning before coming here, we had food before coming. So I think it's the fuel that maintains us alive. Unless you are fasting or you are resilient fasting 4, 5, 6 days, none of us can stay more than that day without food. So at the end of the day, that food comes from a place to where we are, either your hotel or your house, but some people along the food system value chain have contributed. Either you are a policymaker, you are the farmer, a processor, the logistics, someone, the branding, everyone has a contribution to do for us to have it on our table, that have that nutritional value, but also we enjoy it, and it is sufficient and available every time. So that brings us together, that security, which all of us need to work and make sure that as humans, we have it. That's number one. Number two is our continent. Let me zoom now on the African continent. So this continent, which is 1.5 billion people, will be also 3 billion the next coming years by 2050, is the youngest continent on the world. So we are the face of those young people, and we are also supporting them. Most of them have less than 35 years old. They are almost like 70% of the population. And you can see also how it is moving, the vibrant continent, which is also a land of opportunity. A land of opportunity for the simple reason that 60% of the uncultivated land, they're there on the continent. So which means we can be also the food basket and contributing to this global agenda, number one. Two, 365 degrees of sun everywhere on the continent. Renewable energy can be used to power agri-food system value chain. Three is MSMEs. A recent study which we have conducted have shown that 80% of the food economy is a private sector. But of that economy, 85% is on the hand of the MSMEs, young people. So, and they're extremely resilient. So we can see during the COVID, they were able to change their mechanism and survive. By the way, the African continent was the most resilient one during the COVID, where supply chains were disrupted. So there was still a process of moving. So you can see that on this continent, there are opportunities, but the paradox is they are still a net importer when you have all of this. Today, the water, most of these ecosystems, you have areas where, either from the forest to the savanna to the coastal, you have rain for 8 months. In some area, you have, for the Congo Basin, almost the entire year. So while you have those capacity, still irrigation is 5 to 10% as compared to Southeast Asia or Latin America. So we have opportunities to improve the quality of the agri-food system value chain to contribute to this one. Now comes a forum like ours. Why this is not happening with all these opportunities? So in 2006, IARA, which is a private sector entity, set up a conference on investment on the continent. It was in Oslo. And later on, Kofi Annan brought it in Africa in 2010 and called it Africa Green Revolution Forum. So it's a big platform, initially with 200-300 expert investors and the people from the industry. It has grown now to almost 6,000, a gathering of more than 6,000 annually. So we organize it every year, and we bring all leaders, academians, research, private sector, youth, farmers, all of them come together to shape the continental agenda, number one. Two, to invest and find opportunity to trade. And lastly, it's a place for networking and partnership. So this is what the Africa Food System Forum is, and we are also the voice of those who are looking for opportunities on the continent, and extremely happy to be here also to connect the continental agenda and forum to other global forums. So it's also the way we contribute to this global humanity vision.
Thank you, Amath. You touch on the opportunities on the African continent. You touch on also the history, what led to the AFS, the Africa Food System. We have excellencies here, ministers, government officials, and again, excellencies. When some of you we've been talking on your ambitions, the agenda in the countries. The demands are there. Governments say they are ready. They need the support. They need to collaborate. The opportunities are there. We know the climate crisis is making it more complicated, but there are solutions that are working. And one of the topics that always come up in conferences or in meetings is around financing. Why financing is not, why the scale of the financing is not still meeting the magnitude of the issues. So it's not a lack of capital. The capital is there. When you talk to financial institutions, they will say, we have the capital, but we are lacking the right project. We are lacking the right financial structuring. So let's take a moment and deep dive a little bit on financing. Nadine, from IFAD perspective, what is IFAD doing in addressing this access to finance when it comes to agriculture sector?
Yes, okay. The issue of financing is complex. You talk about there's capital, but there's no capital. It's a question of access to capital. The amount are not enough. And we also talk about where the money is going, whether the money is going to the right sector. What is IFAD's role in there? We call it the financing agenda for food system transformation. That's what the UN system calls it. If you take the Africa region, the African Union assessed that it will take about 76 billion a year until 2030 to finance a food system transformation. What are we talking about? Putting in place the infrastructure, putting in place the technology, land development, capacity building, all this has been assessed, and there is a financing gap for that. It's where the money has to come from. So basically, what are we talking about when it comes to financing? Again, we have to refer to data, to refer to evidence. You take the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, they assess that it will take about 40% of the GDP of least developed countries to finance food systems that are functional, 40% of the GDP. You imagine the magnitude of resources that are required. And we are talking of the least developed countries, the 48, out of which 33 are Africans. So basically the resources, the domestic resources to finance this are not available. And this is why the strategy in African countries, it's a combination of resources. The domestic resource mobilization coming from the government, the development partners, I mean, you have the United Arab Emirates, you have the OECD countries, you have the other emerging economies, which have to be mobilized to back up domestic resources, making sure that it's a mutual partnership, and it's also about private sector investment. So the challenge in these countries is to bring together domestic national resources together with those of the development partners and those in the investors in a complementary manner, in a 360 manners, so that the different parts of the food system can be financed. Because what is sure is that domestic resource mobilization is not enough, development assistance is not enough, and private sector money has to be incentivized. It has to be put in a secure environment where the private sector is willing to come. And this is what IFAD is striving to do, to work with the government to create this environment and make the connection between domestic resource, development partners, private sector, and also making sure that these benefit the small producers, the traders, the women, the youth, that the money reach these frontline workers with capacity building and access to finance.
Yep. Thank you, Nadine. It's a complex topic to address, but there are solutions that are working. And you touch also on the least developed countries. And when you look at the landlocked, least developed countries, it's even more complicated. You have the security situation that makes it difficult in some places. Blended finance is part of the solutions. And there are credit guarantee mechanisms that will help to make or reduce the risk for investors. So there are solutions out there. It's still complex. I think the opportunity we have is that we have solutions that can be scaled up, that are working. The question is why we are not moving fast. And that takes me to, back to Amath. The Africa food system, you have a platform that convenes players from policymakers to investors to civil society organizations. What do you see are some of the opportunities to help address some of the points raised by Nadine on the financing side? Not enough funding in one place, but we can come together and you mobilize those players together. What are the opportunities? How AFS can play its role in addressing that?
Yeah. No, thanks. I think this is one of the many issues and challenges which on the African continent we face. But again, I start by saying Africa is a land of opportunity. So the narrative of issues, problem is everywhere. So we are all facing problem. Risk is everywhere. It's just a problem of how do you perceive it and how do you de-risk. Okay. At the end of the day, even in a situation of conflict, you still have opportunity to make money. People will still need to eat. So, and that's not the case. We have issues now everywhere. That's one. Second is, let me focus on youth. It's a very young continent, and they are very innovative. Digitalization has changed the way we do business in Africa, with this 70% of the population that have less than 35 years old. It's a workforce, and they are just looking for opportunities to make things work. So one of those challenges which they are facing is, of course, investment. Because when you are young, there is still a gap in terms of skills. So there is this perception that maybe things will not work. But capacity building will, help us leapfrog. So when we meet at the Africa Food System Forum, we are bringing all the players across the food system value chain. That's why we rebranded. Initially, it was called Agricultural Green Revolution Forum. So in 2021-2022, with the Food System Summit and this global agenda, we said we are not going to solve the problem only with agriculture sector, those who are in agriculture, but it's food. At the end of the day, the final product is food. So it starts with input. Those who are in research, academia, they have to be here. Second, those who produce, farmers, young people, women, all of them, the processors, value addition, branding, because we have now a very critical mass of consumers, and it's shifting in the big cities in Africa. They want like fine products, but also if you want to export, at the end of the day, you need also to meet standards. We are talking about logistics, port, airport, the whole infrastructure for cooling system. We are also talking about policymakers to get it right, but also to bring the right investors, the right partners. So the entire forum bring all of this. You can imagine from 200 now you shift to 6,000 and it's growing. Today, I think the main issue we have is climate change that bring almost 70,000 people during the COP is the same issue we have on food. It's as important as climate, and climate is connected to food. So the issue of investing is important, but the risk need to be removed first by coming together. Enabling environment by policymakers, regulatory frameworks. So when you put your $1, it is also safeguard. And this is also what we are working on. In Africa, there is the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement, which most of the countries are working, but not just trying to say, I can be self-sufficient. We are talking about corridors. Your ecosystem is more favorable for wheat. Let's maximize on you. The other one is better on fishery. The other one is better on livestock. So together we connect, and we connect not only within Africa, but with other part of the world, including here where we are. So That's one challenge which we need to address by bringing blended finance. And the financing which these MSMEs are looking is not really big. Sometimes they're looking for nano credit. Sometimes they're looking for microcredit. Sometimes they're looking for meso. So we are not talking about big one, but together, when you bring them, it is significant. Another element of problems we have also to unleash the potential is infrastructure. So the infrastructure is not just hardcore, it's also digital infrastructure. And most of these young people are now in e-market. You can see all this innovation, for instance, in Kenya, like the M-Pesa, where financial inclusion is there, the different selling and buying on the different platforms. So all of this is booming. It just requires now to be scaled up and with the right infrastructure. I'll end with coordination. When we meet together, I always say our forum is like the United Nations on food, the General Assembly on food. We meet every year at the United Nations for the state of the world. Everyone comes and gives its perspective. But we have to maintain those platforms. People come together to still pursue the momentum and kind of this global agenda, which together and for humanity, we have also to address food and nutrition security. But that has to be like in a different segment of the world. Everyone comes and plays parts. And I think these challenges are not anymore challenges. They are opportunities which we can turn quickly. Just a matter of coming together. The continent put something, and we are organizing this, but we need to connect with other global platforms and forums to make sure that this is moving faster at the space we want.
Thank you, Amath. We have a few minutes left. I would like to take us to another important topic, which is on partnership. But before diving into partnerships, you touched on one thing, and Nadine, you mentioned some of the numbers. Green entrepreneurship for youth and women is key when it comes to looking at the value chain for agriculture. And the same issue of finance comes up, and capacity building comes up. The reason I'm bringing this up is that there are institutions working with governments on some of these topics. And coming together and looking at the video that Dr. Salem showed earlier, coming together, we can make a movement to advance and move fast when it comes to food security and food system transformation. But it requires partnership. Smart policies, as you mentioned, are key. Having those policies translated into green investment plan are also important. At the same time, people-centered approach when it comes to our food system transformation is key. I gave the example of the Africa and Middle East Safe Initiative because we are talking about building a resilient food system in Africa. But that also can benefit other regions. Mm-hmm. The Safe Initiative is meant to have the Africa and the Middle East coming together and addressing the food security as a partnership. So I want you, Nadine, to take us through an example of partnership that IFAD is proud of that you would like to share with the audience. And I will also ask Pathe a similar question. But if we have a few minutes left, we could also ask the audience for 1 or 2 questions. Nadine.
Yes.
Strategic partnership. What example could you share with us?
Strategic partnership. And allow me to be a bit provocative in giving you an example of a partnership that I find particularly inspiring. And why this partnership work, when I say I want to be provocative, is that our starting point is, as you say, food security, women, youth, changing things. And I think the most inspiring partnership I saw was a partnership which changed the beginning of the story, where the beginning of the story was not food security or women or youth. The beginning of the story is market, the demand. What do I mean is that I will take the example of a wonderful program I was able to be part in Nigeria, where there is a market of 200 million people. And you can imagine that market here, a demand for agricultural goods. And I met this very bright Nigerian who said, we need to organize people to produce and transform because there's a market. And so basically what was the story is that we had big multinationals wanting to produce for the national market in Nigeria and wanting to produce for export. And they came, I will not give the name of the company, and they say, we need production. And the demand was there. And so they gave the quantity and the quality standards they needed. And on the other side, we had small producers, smallholders, women, youth indeed. And in IFAD, we say, our job is to give them the capacity to produce, the training, the input, the seed funding. Can we work with you and organize them to produce for this new market and for these international firms? And of course, they were interested. So the second partner, you had the big firm wanting to basically have production for a market. You had a farming population of women, of youth, of small producers ready to produce, but they needed to be supported. And you have a development partners like IFAD coming with the inputs, the training, and the support to do this. Then came the government, the local government, to say, we will put in place the irrigation facility, the storage, the rural roads to connect the market so that these people can also produce. And we also had the Green Climate Fund, which came with sustainable technologies, basically ensuring that there was sustainability and resilience. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that because there was a market, and the market was willing to offer prices, the people started organizing themselves to produce. The development partners put together a package, and the local government also put in place the facilities. It's an amazing program because we just started like this, and you had 50% of the producers who were young people coming from town because there were contracts of billions of nairas waiting for them, and they were interested in doing this. And within a year, production increased by 30%, poverty reduced by 30% in those who were involved in this. We saw also, because you want to see a difference in life, the school attendance going by 20% among the children. They were buying TVs, they were buying motorbikes, and at the same time, the buyers, we call them the off-takers, were delighted because they were having products of quantity, in the quality they wanted, and you had a whole logic of meeting the market demand, which brought benefits also to those in the front line. So it's called the Value Chain Development Program, and it won so many awards, and it's an inspiring story, but the beginning of the story was the market, not charity. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine, for sharing that example of partnership, responding to the demand, looking at the market, access to the market, addressing the financing issues and challenges, having the government buy-in. Whatever we do in the countries need to feed into the government ambitions of economic development. Amath, taking out the AFS, what transformative partnership do you ambition to have the AFS bringing to address or contribute to address the food security and food system transformation challenges in the African continent?
Yeah, I may say again, partnership 5 times. And then that partnership 5 times because, you know, all the continents we are. Number 2 is PPPs. You know, usually we say public-private and partnership, but you add also public-private, producers, philanthropy, partnership. Because all this is the ecosystem which you're trying to bring to connect and make sure that this partnership is working. For the simple reason today, if it comes again back to Africa and where I started, which is a continent of 1.5 billion going to 3 billion in a world of moving to 9 billion people, we need to feed people. Otherwise, we will be into this crisis. So during the COVID, we've learned that we can solve the issues when we come all together, because this was like a critical moment where people, food and security, nutrition and security is also a critical issue. Climate change is a critical issue that only partnership can solve. For the simple reason, ecosystems that help us produce are different from one part of the world to another one. So additionality, complementarity, synergies, and partnership will be key. It goes beyond the continent. Each continent has to work. Some countries has the power in terms of investment. The others have the power in terms of natural resources and also human capital. The continent has young, vibrant people. So we need to create that chain connection to make sure this is working. We do it for the simple reason that these young people, if there is no job, there is no way we can stop the barriers, this Mediterranean migration and whatever so happening. So most of the leaders on the continent want also dignity of their people. They don't want to see this. We don't want to see all these young people dying, crossing the Mediterranean. So agri-food system value chain provide that opportunity on the continent. If collaboration is done, I think that will be one way to do it. Government cannot create jobs. It's created by private sector. So if the enabling environment is put in place, the right incentive in place, so the private sector will thrive and investment will come and flow, and that coordination will be much more easier. So we can grow our MSMEs, which I mentioned earlier, which is 85% contributing to tomorrow giant of the agri-food system and be playing also the key role, so at least we are able to solve this issue of food, global food and security and nutrition and security. So all together we can solve it, and I hope you all are invited to our next forum in Senegal next September, so we have a long way from now, but again we have so many activities which we organize, competition, to create and nurture those MSMEs. So I think with the right partnership, we will be able also to make it, and the continent can play its role.
Thank you very much, Amath. I wish I could give the floor to the audience for a couple of questions, but the time is up. This is a very interesting discussion on, and dialogue on food security, food system transformations. Governments are ready. They want to move. The ambitions are there. But they need to, the governments need the support and the collaboration with other players. Intergovernmental organizations, many of them in this room, invited here, are on board. We have the private sector willing to move and move fast. The private sector, once something makes sense, economic sense, they move fast, very fast. They don't even need to be asked to do that. And then we have the other players, the civil society organization, the smallholder farmers. So I think the spectrum of stakeholders, everybody wants to move fast on addressing food security and food system transformation. It's doable. The chance that we have is that we know solutions that work. We need to scale them up. There are challenges. We can transform them into opportunities. And together, I think we can make it mission impossible becoming possible. So we do have chance. I want to thank you very much on behalf of the organizers, and thank Nadine.
I don't want you to conclude just yet. Yeah. We're able to grant one question from the audience. I know there's a lot of questions, yes, but let's do one question, please, for the esteemed panelists. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone out for you. Okay, we have an excited hand right up there. I know the lights are bright, so we'll get a microphone to you, sir.
Thank you, Jessie. Thank you for giving us a few minutes to accommodate one or two questions. Thanks. If you could introduce yourself, your organization, and then ask the question, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cliff Rasuisui. I'm from South Africa, Department of Trade, Industry, and Competition. I have one question for all of you. I know food security is one of the biggest challenges, but we also have a challenge of food waste, especially in urban area. So what are you doing to address the food waste challenges? Because it can also help to combat food insecurity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question, a very important one on food security, but looking at from the food waste angle, how that exacerbates the food security issue. So let's see if we have another question, and then we can, yes, could you bring the mic there, and then the microphone here to His Excellency. Then we take all three questions and answer. Yes, please, please go ahead here.
Merci, je m'appelle Gabriel Bayrobé, je suis le ministre de l'Agriculture et du Développement rural du Cameroun. Je voudrais apprécier les thèmes débattus par les différents panélistes. Je reviens sur une question, la question de jeunes et des femmes, l'accès au crédit. Parce que c'est vrai que vous avez dit que le gouvernement doit faire des investissements stratégiques, le privé doit jouer son rôle, les partenaires de développement doivent jouer leur rôle. Il y a des systèmes de garantie qui sont mis en place pour les banques, mais pas pour les bénéficiaires finaux, c'est-à-dire les jeunes et les femmes. Le système bancaire leur demande des garanties qu'ils n'ont toujours pas. Et nous tournons en rond, nous n'avons pas résolu ce problème. Et tant que ce problème ne sera pas résolu, nous ne pourrons pas parler de l'insertion des jeunes dans les systèmes productifs. Nous avons, je suis content d'avoir l'IFAD en face, nous avons un programme qui s'appelle PA Jeunes qui a formé 29 000 jeunes sous forme d'incubation. Nous avons pu insérer moins de 3 000 et les autres n'ont pas pu parce qu'il n'y avait pas de crédit de développement de filières pour financer leur activité. Donc je voudrais savoir si les panélistes peuvent nous proposer une solution de de-risking dans ce domaine. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Nous allons toucher à ce point également. His Excellency question is on the access to finance for youth, particularly as the conventional banking system, unfortunately, is not always appropriate to allow access to finance. So we have a lady who, a female, the lady in yellow. Do you want to take the mic? Or so one more. Jesse, you gave us 2-3 minutes, but I think we can take...
One question became 4.
Exactly. So,
I mean, we're generous,
so
but you know.
Yeah, we'll take one more and then we close from there.
Thank you.
It's a challenging, very interesting topic, Jesse. Yes, please go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Maria Santiago. I'm from the United States, and it is an honor to be here this morning. I want to compliment Nadine and Amath on the fact that we need to complement the global security and, as Amath said, the partnerships. All the P's are important, and I love the market. If we could concentrate on the market and concentrate on the P's, I think we can end this entire hunger and bring the hope into perspective. And I also want to thank Mr. Salim. I love the musical component of bringing music into the atmosphere. It calms the entirety of bringing the global love to food and stopping hunger. It's not nice to know as we eat every day and put our hands to our mouth, there's still people that are hungry in the world. So I thank you, and I thank everyone for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you,
Dr. Mahamadou.
Thank you very much for that positive note. So, Amath, 1 minute to your take on either the food waste angle of food security or the access to finance for youth.
Yeah, I will maybe go with access to finance for youth because the youth is also, part of my heart. And I think, looking for resources on the continent, the de-risking mechanism will start by government speaking with the financial sector. So the financial sector need also some improvement from the central banks along all the different players. It's not only banks, but it's microfinance, it's insurance company, and those insurance companies need to be in place. The other way of de-risking, to remove the risk of and perception to the young people to access, is capacity building. So once that capacity is built, so they will also know that this is another thing. The asset, access to asset. Any banks would like to invest or finance, but you need to own those assets. Or if you are not owning those assets, there should be some mechanism for them to own it for the period of production, so at least investment. The third one is we need to make sure also that the interest rate the tenor or for the loans, all of these kind of things are also put within the capacity of the client. The client we have, we know them. And this can come with resource from IFAD, from private sector, from the others. So we make sure that that ecosystem of de-risking is improving, so there is more like, you know, the confidence to invest in. And the scoring of those young people, making sure that their project is bankable. So it has to have return on investment. It's not really charity. I think most of them now want to move. And there are different pieces to put together to make sure that money flows to all of them and get there. Lastly is on the food waste. 60% of our production, before when coming to the market, is lost. So it's post-harvest losses. I think value addition, processing, system of conservation is one. On the other side of the continent, you have many people who, like, you know, eat at their sufficient and then even, you know, so that's also a matter of education, but understanding that outside some continent, there are people who are also dying of hunger when you were just like, you know, wasting your food. So I think most of it is partnership when we understand different continent, what is going on, and educating our global humanity, so we'll be able to solve it.
Okay, that was a one long minute, Amath. So giving to you, Nadine. 1 minute, your take on the 2 points.
Just on the 2 points, and Mr. Minister, I really want to say something about the AGRF, because you may not know, but I was actually the one who designed this program in Cameroon. I was country director for IFAD in Cameroon at that time when we had this consultation between the government and the youth to put in place this program. And to address the issue of the youth and also the food waste, I wonder why for decades we keep going around the same issues, you know, of access of the youth to finance or the food waste. I would just say simply the youth issue is a risk management and a risk transfer issue. And that role has to be played by the public sector, which means that financing institutions will be willing to take the risk because it's private funds. If us, as government, as development partners, we are willing to take some of the risk, which means the training of the youth, supporting them in business plan, providing them also with seed, grant funding, which makes them less risky for the financial sector, basically, because they do not have collateral. So we need, as a public sector, to take some of those risks. And we know the mechanisms are there, and I had a young gentleman from Tanzania who told me the issue is that the private sector or the financial institutions see me as a liability, not as an opportunity. And this is the perception we need to change by taking some of the risk. When it comes to food waste, the technology are there, and it's about the infrastructure for the storage, for the, Pathe mentioned it, for the transport. It is about the infrastructure for the processing, the basic transformation. It's the investment that we need to make to start wasting food, and that we are still not making also as government investing enough in agricultural transformation, transportation, or processing. So I think we have a responsibility to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
1 minute as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Nadine, and for Amath.